can't think of better evidence.
What,
Why should,
can you think of a better?
So now I'm going to ask you this, I'm going to ask you this, I'm going to ask you this. I'm not going to answer that question because we're staying on this point.
Can't.
No, it's because I'm staying on this point. I'm not going to run away to a different point. Every time we've had this conversation, you've done one of three things. You've either refused to answer a question that I've asked, or you've tried to move to a different point of conversation like you just did. So what I'm going to do is be patient enough to stick on this point of conversation, which is on empiricism being true. Can you use empiricism to prove that empiricism is evidence?
Yes.
How would you go about doing that?
Because we used to think that the sun went round the earth.
Okay.
That's what we used to think.
Okay.
And now we don't.
How does that show that empiricism is true?
If you go into a spaceship, you can see the earth go around the sun.
That's fine.
You can test it.
Well, the problem is that's not telling me. Hold on. That's not telling me that I should use empiricism. What you've done? Can I finish?
No.
Could I please finish? You said no, I can't finish. Thank you. Right? Look, we got to make sure that we're patient in our conversation so that we can get to the truth. So, what you showed me, and I want to be very clear, is an example of someone using empiricism.
Yes.
What it wasn't was a demonstration of why we should use empiricism rather than not.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
We use it because it works. If we send a spaceship up, we can see the earth
you use it because
go around the sun. We can actually view it. We can experience it and record it.
Okay. You use it because it works. I still want to understand this point. Is that okay?
What other means is they're demonstrating?
Yeah.
We've got a question. Does the earth go around the sun, or does the sun go around the earth?
Yeah.
We used to think the earth was the centre of the universe. The sun went around the universe. The sun went around the earth.
The problem is that even
what other means is there of demonstrating the truth of the proposition?
Okay, fine. Number one, logic. Number two,
not logic.
history.
There's no logical. If you look it up at the sun, you
Wait, did you say that there are no logical truths?
No, I never said that.
Okay, I didn't want you to say that.
You can't demonstrate whether the sun goes around the or the earth goes around the sun by logic.
That's not the question that we asked. That's not the question that we asked. The question you asked is, what other ways can we use to get to the truth of a claim? That's what you asked. That's what you asked.
I don't think there is no other way.
Okay, great.
At the moment, there's no other way.
All right.
The only
Let me ask you a question. All right, hold on. Can I ask you? Okay, I'm gonna ask you this. Okay, is it
unless
true?
It's the rules of chess.
The rules of chess. That's fine. Is it true that 1 + 1 is 2?
It's a tautological question. Yeah, it's like the rules of chess.
Okay, the rules of chess, friend.
It's like trying to play chess.
Can I ask you?
It's like trying to play chess using the rules of drafts.
The problem is playing chess itself isn't true in itself. It's not true in itself. Maths is true.
Why is it true?
Chess isn't true.
Why is it true than chess?
Because denying...
They're both tautological statements.
If I say that chess is
They're all axiomatic.
If I say that chess is a... Can I finish? If I say that chess is a shite game and it shouldn't exist... Can I finish?
Yes.
If I say that chess is a shite game and it doesn't really exist, it's phony anyways, I haven't actually destroyed the world, okay? Destroyed my worldview. Can I finish? Whoa. Can I finish? Okay. The point is that if I deny maths, the world will break down.
It won't.
The worldview will break down.
The world will still be here.
I will give you an example. Because you're misunderstanding my point.
I'm not.
When I say the world will break down, I mean I can't account for anything in the world. What that means? Thank you.
You can.
What? No, you can't.
You can.
Because if
numbers are universal.
For example, if I say that 1 + 1 is 5, I can't guarantee any other truths.
Yes.
I can't. Because the reason why I can fly...
You can demonstrate the change in the colour of the leaves.
If I say that...
need mathematics.
That's great. If I say that change exists and doesn't exist at the same time, can I guarantee that? No, I cannot.
Can you guarantee what?
So the point is there are other truths... Pardon?
Can you guarantee what?
Can I guarantee that change exists if I say that it exists and doesn't exist at the same time?
No, look.
Yes or no, please?
The colour of the leaves change. The colours of the leaves change. We all, up to now...
If I say that the colours of the leaves change and don't change at the same time, can I say that they change?
They do change.
I'm saying that they change and they don't change at the same time.
No, they can't say that.
Why can't I say that?
Because they don't change.
Wait, what did you say?
Because we can.
Because it doesn't make sense.
No. We can empirically view it. They don't.
Yeah, and I'm saying I'm empirically seeing that it changes and doesn't change at the same time.
You can't.
I am. I'm seeing it right now.
No, you can't.
Yes, I am. I'm seeing it right now. Why can't I see it?
It's not happening.
It is. It's right now happening.
It's green.
Wait, guys, can you not see it changing and not changing at the same time?
It's green. It's green.
And now it's red. It's red and green.
Can you empirically prove right and wrong?
No.
But right and wrong exists, right?
Not in any.
Let me ask you this question. Is rape wrong? Hold on. This is easy.
Not in any objective sense.
Wait, whoa. No, that's the problem, right? Because I believe...
Because you'll be confused.
Right, because I believe that there are moral truths. There are many kinds of truths. There are empirical truths, there are historical truths, there are moral truths, mathematical truths, logical truths, metaphysical truths.
Well, there are only two.
All these truths. Okay.
There are only two types.
I'm going to ask you a question. Is rape wrong?
Is what?
Rape, is it wrong?
In what sense? It's not wrong in any absolute sense.
Okay, fine.
Whoa.
What makes rape wrong?
I think it's wrong personally.
Personally, okay. What makes rape wrong?
Well, because it's bad.
It's what?
It's bad for the person getting raped.
It's bad for the person getting raped.
Is murder wrong?
How do you... I believe it's wrong, yes.
Under all circumstances.
On all circumstances, the unjustified killing of someone is wrong. Yes.
Well, all right then.
Killing in self-defense is wrong, for example.
Justifiable homicide.
Is killing wrong?
Is killing wrong? Not in itself, no.
So it's not always wrong.
There are justified reasons as to why the life of a person is taken, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, rape is always wrong. Rape is always... Where's it ever right? It's never right, yeah. So the point that we're saying is you don't use empiricism to judge that rape is wrong. Okay, so then I'm using something else.
We can't demonstrate.
So then I'm using something else. Thank you. Thank you.
Prove that rape is wrong.
Good. Is rape wrong?
And in a value terms, yes. In my own value state, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
So can it be okay for someone else?
From my point of view, no.
Why can't it be okay for someone else?
Because it's from my point of view. It's not. What other person says.
Is your point of view right?
I think, in my opinion, it's right. Yeah.
In your opinion, it's right. No, is it actually right?
No, not in any objective sense.
Okay, not in any objective sense. Let's say, okay, fine. Okay. So could I ask you a question? If society agrees that rape is wrong, is that fine?
No.
It's not fine.
No.
So if society agrees that rape is okay, is that fine?
No.
Why isn't it okay for a group of people that are not you to agree on something?
A group of people can say whatever they like.
Okay, and you can say whatever you like as well.
I can say whatever I like.
But it doesn't make it right.
I think my opinion is better than theirs.
Okay, what makes your opinion better?
What makes your opinion better than
I never
theirs?
said anything about better or worse. What makes your opinion better?
What makes the rapist's opinion better?
I'm asking you, what makes your opinion better? You said, so bear in mind, everyone, bear in mind, hold on, bear in mind.
Demonstrate.
You said it's better. No one else said it's better. You said, okay, how do you know it's better?
I can't demonstrate it.
So you can't demonstrate your claim?
Well, I can, in a kind of loose sense.
Then demonstrate it.
Well, I can say it's bad. It's bad for the person who gets raped. It's bad.
What makes the person getting raped bad? What if society decided, well, you know what? I think that non-consensual sex is great. I think it's an amazing thing. Don't clip me out of context, please. Do you know what I mean?
I've answered that question already.
You haven't?
I have. I think it's bad. The rapist thinks it's okay.
Yeah, you think it's bad. What makes that thing bad?
Well, how do you know? What determines?
All you're doing is shifting the question onto me. I'm asking you.
I don't think you can.
So this is the problem, right?
Well, how do you determine the
Hold on.
Whoa. No. What's your
You're asking me the question now.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. You literally are asking a question.
I've answered it. I've been honest. The rapist has his opinion, I have mine.
Yes.
You said the rapist is wrong.
What makes
How do you determine the rapist is wrong?
What makes the rapist wrong or right?
What makes it wrong for you?
Okay. We need to have ethics. And the point is you don't judge ethics by empiricism.
I never said you did.
So therefore, so now let's circle back. Therefore, there are other ways.
What is the way?
There are other ways.
How do you determine the rape is wrong?
Other ways of determining truth.
How do you do it?
Empiricism, ethics. We've got another one. A third one, logic.
No.
Okay. Another one, metaphysics.
No.
All of these ways are different ways that we can use to get to truth.
How do you determine?
You're saying no. But the problem is, you're saying no.
Can I ask
the reason why I'm continuing is because remember the point that we're saying.
What's the point?
The point that we're saying is he said that there isn't a better way of getting to the truth than empiricism. And you said it's the only way that he knows of.
Empirical questions.
Exactly. Okay. Is the existence of, thank you. Is the existence of God an empirical question?
Let me finish. I'm going to walk away.
It's fine if you want to walk away.
Which I will if I can't finish my sentences.
You haven't been letting me finish my sentence. Like middle of my sentence, start of yours. Like it's crazy.
What are you looking for? What is your objective?
No. But he's made a good point. He said that empirical claims solve empirical questions. I like that.
Okay.
The existence of God was never an empirical question to begin with in the history of philosophy.
Yes, it is.
It's a theological question.
Not only it's a metaphysical question. It's an ontological question. And ontology doesn't need empiricism.
Unicorns need defining.
Pardon?
Unicorns.
If a unicorn is defined as an empirical object,
No, I'm asking you.
Pardon?
If God's a metaphysical question, why not unicorns?
Because of the definition of a unicorn.
Well,
Hey, guess what?
Unicorns have.
Here's the crazy thing, right? Here's what I want you to do now. If you say, I was middle of my sentence, start of yours.
If you say God is a metaphysical question, why not unicorns?
Unicorns are omnipresent.
Yeah,
do you
because
know?
hold on.
know?
This is great. Because
How
guess
do you know?
what? Even if you want to make the claim that a unicorn is a metaphysical, immaterial, non-composite, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, that's just another name for the God concept. That's fine by me.
What if God's a unicorn?
You could call God unicorn all you like. I don't care.
What if God is a unicorn?
Okay, what's a unicorn?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so how can you say what if he is a unicorn?
I don't believe
With wings.
Okay, so the problem is
The word unicorn for God is identical.
yeah.
I don't believe in God or unicorn.
For example, we say that the definition of God is the unbegotten one. We use many names for God, the all-powerful one, the loving one. We use many names for God. I could say spaghetti monster and unicorn, and I can put it onto God, and I wouldn't care, and I'll still be a Christian.
Well, that's fine. If you believe that God is a spaghetti monster and a unicorn, that's fine.
Okay.
One.
But the problem is this.
One.
Okay, then say Christ is
You're
Lord.
not one because the content.
Because again, the name is one thing. The content of the name is different.
How do you know the content of God?
Because
how can you know what the content of God
the
is?
content of God.
That there's other ways.
Yeah,
to get
because if I use
it?
metaphysics, it can describe the content of God.
You demonstrate metaphysically the content of God.
Yes.
How do you do it?
Good example. The act potency distinction is one of them.
The what?
The act potency distinction.
Okay.
Another principle is the PSR.
You tell me your best argument for the metaphysical proof of God.
You're not going to understand the argument.
I'm not going to understand it.
No. They will. Everyone else will.
They
just
will,
you.
but not me.
No, because you don't know things about things.
No, you.
That's not my fault. That's not my fault.
You don't know.
Okay, you know what? Here's what I'll do.
The best metaphysical explanation of
I won't
God
give you the best.
I will understand.
I won't give you the best. I'll give you the one that you can understand.
In a time like mortal danger, like you're almost going to die, would you go, oh, God, save me?
Yes.
I can't like that. That's good. That's the brain waves. That's the intellect. You get.
Well, because
Okay, so can I present the argument now?
He doesn't have to be a Christian, though.
So let's just recap as he's coming.
Does that go for Adolf Hitler then?
Adolf Hitler. Yeah. So
all right.
I'm gonna reply. I didn't say yes. I didn't say yes or no. I was just gonna reply to your question.
Adolf Hitler's soul is now in heaven.
We don't know.
As an atheist, my soul is going to hell. I've never hurt anyone. I've never stolen from anyone.
Okay.
I've never lied to anyone. Because I do not believe in Jesus, I'm going to hell.
Okay.
Adolf Hitler.
I'm gonna let him finish.
And you believe this
I'm gonna let him
bullshit.
finish.
And you believe this bullshit.
Let's let him finish.
I'm a
Secular paganism philosophy.
Yeah, I'm gonna let him finish.
You don't believe in God, did you ever God?
I believe in nature. I believe in forces. I believe that.
Yeah, suicide is like a death offense. Yeah. Anyways, look, I'm just gonna let him finish.
So I believe that organized.
I'm a Christian. I believe in science.
Paganism and philosophy.
Do you believe that?
I'm agnostic to that view, but I don't care. I don't care. Like,
Do you believe?
look, if the world was 10,000, can I finish? Look, if the earth was 10,000 years old, it wouldn't make me not a Christian. If the earth is a billion years old, I wouldn't care.
Because it's your faith, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the point is that whether the universe is 13 billion years old or 10,000 years old is irrelevant to whether God exists or not, and it's relevant to whether Christianity is true. I don't care.
Why choose Christianity and not
Yeah,
Zoroastrianism?
yeah, that's true. Apart from the God, I understand that. Apart from the God claim, there are other claims that are fulfilled by religions, like sociology, as well as history. Now, I believe within the history that we have of Christianity, it best characterizes the world and is the only explanation for the entire states of things that we have. Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to go to hell simply because you're not a Christian. I'm going to say that you're going to hell in your obstinance to God. I don't think you're obstinate to God because you haven't presented such. Neither have you, apparently.
But you know the concepts that Christianity has?
Like what?
Messiah, Christ.
These are
the afterlife.
These are Jewish concepts.
Yeah. No, but they're also Zoroastrian concepts.
That's fine. It's also
Christ.
Yeah, it's
Christ
also
consciousness, messiahship.
Not Christ consciousness. It's also a Zoroastrian belief that the sky is blue. The point is just because two other sections believe in something and one section is pagan and the other one is Christian, it doesn't mean that the Christians copy from the pagans. In fact, we probably have more evidence than not to suggest that pagans, especially in the Hellenistic world, took from Christian philosophy. A good example. I'm going to give you a good example. That argument has been made by many, but individuals like Ilaria Ramelli, she published a paper on Neoplatonism. Plotinus was an individual that, started off the Neoplatonic movement. To make it simple, there are Greek words in Plotinus's book that was not written by Plotinus, it was written by his students, Porphyry. Porphyry took that phrase from Origen, who was a Christian. The Christian word hypostasis that makes its way into neo-pagan literature, that makes its way into Neoplatonist literature, comes from Christians. In fact, we have pagan philosophers like Numenius of Aramea who directly quotes from the Bible. He quotes narratives of Jesus. More often than not, it is the pagan take from the Christians. It is a false narrative, I would argue, that it is the other way around.
Cross is a pagan symbol.
How is a cross a pagan symbol?
Because it represented the four winds.
No.
Many cultures, surrounded Judea, they had a cross symbol.
Could you name one of those cultures?
Egypt had a cross symbol. The Coptic Christians used that as a cross.
Yes, the Coptic Christians actually...
You've got the Tau cross, T-A-U, the Tau cross.
I'm going to explain can I explain the Coptic one, the Ankh?
Go on.
So actually, in the history of Christianity, when it moved into Egypt, Mark, the person that we believe wrote the Gospel of Mark, he
didn't actually. We don't know. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John never existed. You don't know your Bible.
That's a false claim.
Who don't believe in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were English names. No one knows who wrote the fucking Bible.
I'm going to continue on that.
And by the way, the Bible was written by Jews.
Can I finish?
Who call themselves the chosen of God.
Can I finish?
And that's why we are where we
Can I finish?
Today.
Can I finish?
Okay?
Can I finish?
If you believe, if they genuinely believe they're the chosen of God, they can do what the fuck they like to the Palestinians because God loves them. And that's why we are where we are, because of fucking religion. That's all I've got to say to you. I don't believe I'm going to hell because hell doesn't exist. God doesn't exist.
Sounds like you're not going to hell because you don't want hell. But I want to answer that question.
And I'm a humanist.
Right.
I treat everyone as equally. And if you believe I'm going to hell...
I said it sounds to him that he says that he's not going to hell, but it sounds to me like he's saying that he doesn't want to go to hell because he doesn't want hell to be real. Can I finish my point before you finish?
Okay, yeah.
Can I finish? Can I finish? Thank you. Because I think we agree that I've tried to be my best to be respectful. Right? So to continue on this point, okay. With Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John being English names, Mark is an English translation of a Greek name, Marcos. Marcos is actually a Greek name. Lucas is a Greek name. Johannes is a Hebrew name.
The Greeks didn't write the Bible.
Yes, they did.
The Jews wrote the Bible.
So again, the Jews. Can I finish? Can I finish? Okay. So again, I've studied. Not only do I study the New Testament, I also study early Christian history. What we have is that the Old Testament was written primarily by what we would consider Jewish people. That's fine. The New Testament was written by individuals that were converts from Judaism to Christianity. So Lucas,
Jesus was Jew anyway.
Jesus was Jewish, that's fine. However, pardon?
You can't.
Yeah, the same way.
They can't prove the authorship.
I want to do that. Okay. The way that we prove the authorship of the New Testament letters is the same way that we have proved the authorship of other books in history, like Cicero, like Varro, like Aristotle. A good example of this is a conversation. This conversation has happened centuries before by an individual called Augustine, who was an African Christian in Tunisia. This is what he said. He said the way that we've proven that Varro, Aristotle, and other people wrote their books is because when the author published it and made it public, individuals in that community passed it down from teacher to student. And so as the belief became more common in general, we became more certain about who wrote the books. The same system was used for Christians.
Yeah, but it hasn't been proven.
For example, do you believe
the authorship of the Old Testament?
For example, do you believe
if they haven't the authorship of the Old Testament?
Actually,
how can they
here's the problem.
How can they
the study of the authorship
of the New Testament?
The study of the authorship the study of the authorship of the Old Testament is a different study than the study of the authorship of the New Testament. Have you ever read the actual arguments, not the scholars' names, the actual arguments that they use? The arguments they use is this. Well, we need to assume with suspicion that it wasn't one author but a community of people. But they haven't given evidence to prove that. Here is what we say. The history of the church, the history of the students of these individuals in these communities passed down the information that these specific individuals wrote the text. A good piece of evidence is to say this. Out of the 4 Gospels that we have, 2 of them were not part of the 12 disciples. Why didn't we take Mark and Luke and say that Philip wrote it? Or that Peter wrote it? It would have helped us much more. But we chose, apparently, 2 random people. Now bear in mind, in the history of the church, these names have never had any variance whatsoever. Even the heretics that hated these scripts didn't contest that those people wrote them. Apart from one person in history, Faustus the Manichaean. And in fact, the only reason he ever complained about that was because every time he tried to quote the Bible, Augustine would quote it better and he would just start to complain. He wasn't actually making any arguments. In New Testament critical scholarship today, similar arguments about a criteria of suspicion are used.
But it's not definitive.
Their arguments themselves aren't definitive, but from the data that we do have with patristic history, I would argue that we actually know who wrote those texts.
It's still skepticism.
Now, you can always be skeptical, but it depends on how you categorize your evidence.
Okay.
I choose...
It's a lot for that.
No. Okay, for example, I'll give an example.
I believe that these people did write it.
I'll give an
give my entire life over to live in a certain
life. That's it. Whether those people wrote it is a different claim as to whether I would surrender to Christ and say He's my Lord. That's a different claim. Now, a lot of the evidence that we use to patristic history, the reason why it's discounted is simply because those individuals liked the Jesus fella. That's it. That isn't, I believe, that isn't a good reason to discount their testimony. Now, I'm going to say something else. The existence of Muhammad, right? You believe Muhammad existed?
No.
Right.
Islam's history is even weaker.
Now, here's the
its scholarship's even weaker.
Here's the thing, right?
That's why they're not as good as the
now, for example, right? Modern critical scholars would not be jumping at the bit to say, well, we don't know who wrote the Quran or we don't know who wrote these hadith.
And it's true.
And the reason why they don't want to say that is because in Muslim history, the way they record their history is entirely hagiographical. It's not historiography. What they do is, for example, a simple hadith that is narrated by Aisha about Muhammad. Every single person in that chain has to be a Muslim.
Yes.
Now, in use the critical views of the scholars, I could have reasonable suspicion to say actually this entire chain is BS because they're all religiously motivated.
And
but that isn't.
And the Quran chapters are not in chronological order. Chapter 1 should be chapter 4.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It's all over the place.
Now this is the thing.
How can it be holy?
But we don't treat it as such. We don't treat it that way in scholarship. So I would argue that there seems to be a religious bias against the Christian religion because of the way that scholarship has worked from the 1800s till now. And you can measure that. Now, here's what I will say, okay? When it comes to the hell question, okay? If I believe that you're in hell, it's not going to be because you did bad things. It's going to be because you were already on the way to hell because your will wasn't aligned with God. I believe that since Hitler committed suicide, he's most likely in hell. I don't believe that he repented and stuff like that. And even if he did repent, right, it could be a cop-out, it could be anything of those natures. We also believe, and here's the thing, we believe in this as well, and this is actually the Christian position on this. After an individual dies, let's say someone has never heard the gospel before, they're not going to immediately go to hell. After they die, Christ has the power to present the gospel to them, and upon their acceptance, they'll be admitted into heaven. Easy. For you as well, if you die, take it that there are more emotional or sociological reasons why you don't believe in a God figure. That's fine. Let me ask you.
Why can't it be the other way around? Let's say
because you're critiquing my view.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if it was, but you're fair enough to say that. I was a Native American.
I just want to finish this question as well. So let me ask you a question. If Jesus right now came down to you and said, "Hello, I'm God. Christianity is true," would you believe in him?
Well, I say, fuck, that's amazing. And I'm going to say to him, are you omnipresent? Is God omnipresent everywhere?
Let's say he answered all the questions. I'm just saying, if Christ appeared in himself to you, would you believe?
Yes. Awesome. All right.
So you would be in heaven. You would also be in heaven because the idea is now that God has sufficiently shown himself to you, because we don't believe that you stop existing after death. After death, you can still get it.
Zoroastrians or Mazda appeared.
Would you believe in
Mazda?
Yeah.
Would you believe in Zoroastrianism?
I wouldn't believe in Zoroastrianism.
Even if the God appeared
and I would say that it's fair for him to send me to hell. Now, here's what I would argue.
Okay, that's fair.
Now, here's what I would argue, right? Here's what I would argue with Ahura Mazda, right? Yeah. If there are logical or historiographical inconsistencies, like we don't see in Christianity when we look at the study of the religion, then we would say that Ahura Mazda wouldn't be a true belief. A good example is just on metaphysics, right? Good example. Ahura Mazda isn't all-powerful. He can get stronger the more you pray to him. It's a good example. The more you do good in the world, the stronger Ahura Mazda gets, and the weaker Angra Mainyu gets. Now, in order for you to be the cause of everything, both changeable, both unchangeable, you yourself cannot be affected by something. And so Ahura Mazda, logically for those principles, I would argue would be wrong. And I would do the same with other religions and so on. I would also use, historical claims as well.
They can make the same arguments of false Christianity. So what I'm trying to say is that...
What argument would they make?
Because you're saying that...
Because I'm coming from a logical stance or a metaphysical stance.
Right, but the Bible is only 3,500 years old.
That's fine at the Bible, but I didn't go to the Avesta, did I? Did I use the Avesta when I was critiquing? No. So them just going straight to the Bible is actually mischaracterizing the kind of argument they want to use.
Okay, but you know Jesus Christ for the Old Testament, for the New Testament.
And the Old Testament, yes.
And the Old Testament. So we have to, if you're making the strength of this character comes from this book, the only way we know about this character is from this Bible.
But we also know the character
because Native Americans, let's say their religion comes down orally.
I would like, but we also have oral tradition as well.
Yeah, but
we have the succession of the apostles.
It was the oral tradition that became a Torah. But I'm saying...
No. I'm saying, okay, so I'm writing a thesis right now. So I believe, and it's not just a belief, okay? And the reason I'm saying I believe is just so that I can be nicer, okay? The position of the Christian churches is actually that the oral and written tradition grew simultaneously. They both exist and use both. Not just the Bible, but the early Christian tradition. I'll give you an example. The Bible says that we should baptize people in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Everyone knows this. It doesn't tell you what kind of water to use. It doesn't tell you what kind of confessions you make before and after. It doesn't tell you what days you can get baptized and so on and so forth. These things are in the oral tradition, and we use both. Now, when I was critiquing Zoroastrianism, and notice, I never appealed to their holy text. I didn't appeal to their holy book. All I did was take a logical stance on the way that they worship their God, and I argue that there is an inconsistency with that God criteria, because I would say that Ahura Mazda doesn't fulfill the criteria to be the cause of everything. He would need to be caused by something else.
I know, but that's by your logic or your chosen logic.
No, I'm just using metaphysics. Like, for example, whether or not those truths would still exist. That's the point. Now, if a Zoroastrian wants to do the same to me, that's fine.
All right, that's fair, and I like that.
Now, and we would have a conversation on that.
Can you see the attempt that they make? If 1,000 people pray to one God and one person pray to one God, then the 1,000 people praying to a God, that God is stronger than the one that prays to the one person praying to.
Now the problem is that makes that God contingent. He's changeable. He can be stronger. He can be weaker. He can be smarter. He can be dumber. He could have better glasses. You could have a beard that connects. You know, these are.
Take the mask off.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Do you believe everything in the Bible? Everything?
Yeah, sure.
Do you believe the Bible? Do you know the Bible promotes slavery?
No.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
It says women are second to men.
Can I finish?
Women are second class.
Can I finish?
Go on.
Very good point.
Deny everything now.
Because
Let him talk.
The Bible promotes murder as well.
yeah.
Write it down. This is what they do.
It's slavery.
Women are murdering.
And God sanctions it.
All right, can I finish?
Go on, carry on.
Okay, so now we've moved from analyzing the contingency of a Roda Mazda to slavery in the Bible. I just want everyone to know, 2 different topics, right?
Yeah. But
All right, I'm going to go to this time. I'm going to try this.
You was fair with your critique.
Yeah.
Zoroastrian.
I'm going to do this now, okay? Now, when I said no, I'm allowed to explain myself. As a black person, we understand that the slavery that is mentioned in the Bible is not the same as the transatlantic slave trade. Now, here is what slavery was articulated in the Bible. In fact, the Exodus 21 laws and all of these laws that articulate, and the Levitical laws that articulate slavery and so on. Slavery, in its general definition, is just the state of someone being owned by someone else. Okay? However, the distinction here is that someone that becomes the slave of someone else is volitional. Let's say, for example, in 2020, I'm trying to put this in the 21st century context. Let's say, for example, you don't have any money, you've run out of money, you don't have a job, you have nothing. You go to someone and you say, look, I will work for you for 7 years. And in exchange, I would like for you to give me these things. I'll do anything you want. You write up a contract, you write up a contract. And you fulfill the terms of that agreement, and after 7 years, in the same book of Leviticus, chapter 25, you are immediately released from office.
Only if you're Jewish.
Only if you're Jewish. Completely fine. All I'm doing right now is explaining, can I finish?
Carry on. Yeah, go on.
Every single time I try to speak, you interrupt me.
Go on.
It's sickening now. I need you to be humble enough to not do that. Okay? Okay. So in the Jewish context, okay, those people would be released every 7 years. And every 25 years, both Jewish and non-Jewish slaves are also freed. Every 25 years. It's a super jubilee. Now, here's what's important, okay? Because I am not a Jew, I am a Christian, I don't believe that those laws in themselves were the perfection of God's revelation. And I will explain what I mean, okay? The Jews' laws at the time were to demonstrate the transgressions that they were in. If I want to give someone a good and correct moral system, and they are very morally depraved, I don't just give them the moral system straight away, because they're not capable of following it. It's like teaching a kid how to ride a car, and they're not tall enough. You need to train the kid up to know what they're doing. Now, sometimes that will mean that you're going to accept practices that are not the ideal. However, shut up. However, don't be racist. Now, however, okay? However, these laws, because you're asking a Christian, you're not asking a Jew. These laws were to show the transgression of the Israelite peoples, to show how bad they were as a unit. What those laws did was make the Jews comparably better to other Canaanite and pagan groups. I think all of us can agree on that. What it didn't do was make the Jewish people an amazing people. That's not what it did. What it was supposed to do was to draw them closer to the perfection that we see, where, for example, in Galatians, slavery is completely abolished in all forms. Where we have, for example, the interpretation of those laws, which is to be extended to everyone in a Christian state. For example, in a Christian state, whether you're a Christian or you're a pagan slave, you would be allowed to have the exact same rights under the slave laws, completely. The Jubilee years were a testament to that revelation. Now, the point being made...
God in the Old Testament sanctioned slavery.
God in the Old Testament...
He said people should go and invade and kill, take your, rise up and...
Yeah, but he's not killing random innocents. He's killing people that boil their babies.
I know, but
let me ask you.
Your God still supports invasion.
Can I?
Rising up an army. Taking up arms.
One very important part.
I'll give you an example. Here's an example. Right now, there is a very the political crisis that you mentioned with Israel and Palestine.
Yes.
Do the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves?
Yes.
Do they also have a right to attack against the state of Israel in an offensive sense?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Those offenses are still detailed in the Old Testament.
Yes.
You said that you were against the taking up of arms. You said that you were against invasion. You just now
I
advocated.
didn't say I was against it. I said you're God's sanctuary.
Okay, so if you're not against it, then why do you care?
I care because
Is it a bad thing for someone to endorse those things?
Of course,
it's immoral.
Is it a bad thing for you?
I like the question. It's the thing that
Try and think about it.
it's a thing that the God says, I am the supreme. I am this. I am that.
That's fine.
I created
Yes.
everyone.
And then-
I'm the of love.
and then-
Why the fuck does he put up
he's going somewhere.
And just
I'm going somewhere.
I'm not going to answer that another question again. I'm going to stick on this.
I want to hear because I think I know
problem?
what you mean.
And I'll answer that later, but yes. Go on.
So this God says it's got this power,
Yeah.
and it's supreme,
Yeah.
and it's the true God.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm trying to say to you?
God of
And this is
love.
where the problem comes in, because this same belief system
Yeah.
came in contact with the Maoris in New Zealand, the Aborigines in Australia, the Native Americans in North America, Central America, the Caribbean, and then this God automatically takes supremacy.
This God.
over the God of the Bible.
The white man when I basically know they're fucked. That's what.
All right, I'm going to explain that point.
Frank about this.
That's fine.
Let's be frank.
The God from
But I'm gonna-
the God from
alright.
the Bible teachings, it came into contact with all these different cultures, but it's the true God. So therefore, it has to have supremacy, supersedes all the other cultures. Aztec,
Here's a question that I want to ask. It's okay.
Aztec, Inca, Hindu.
We're gonna finish what they're saying.
Every single culture come in contact with this Bible God wins. It's numero uno. It doesn't have an equal.
Okay.
And one
By the way, I'm not.
What makes that God better than the Maori gods?
Okay, that's
The
fine.
Aborigine gods. The
Okay.
Native American gods.
Whoa. Okay. By the way, it's not Native American gods, Native American gods, or some sort of spiritual energy. But the point being is, even in the Bible, we actually appeal to pagan works to prove the existence of our God. Give an example. St. Paul went to a debating spot, like Speaker's Corner, in the Areopagus in Athens. He noticed that there were many statues of different gods. And what he said is this: listen, you guys are very, very auspicious, you're very superstitious, and I appreciate your religiosity. You worship all of these different gods, Zeus, Minerva, all of them, whether Greek or Roman. Minerva is a Roman name. However, you have a statue here that's just a slab of rock. And on the slab of rock, it says, "To the unknown God." This specific God, I'm going to preach that God to you. I'm going to say that this God was not made by hands. All of these other gods were made by stone and so on. Now, if you look into these cultures, such as in the Native American cultures, Aboriginal cultures, for example, Emil Durkheim, who actually researched Aboriginal religion in this aspect, you will notice that evangelistic efforts by Christians weren't inherently violent. That's not the first thing. That is a narrative that's been popularized by Hollywood, for example. The second thing that I will grant you is this: there was absolutely violence in the Americas due to manifest destiny. None of those was commensurate with the early Christian church, in fact. In fact, that was later with Protestant Baptists that moved from England to America. In no way are the Baptists identical with the early Christians. In fact, they're an offshoot of traditional Christianity, which is why I can disavow them completely, right?
What makes that Bible God superior to the other gods, all the other cultures?
Yeah, because the Bible God that we're arguing for, the Bible God that we're arguing for accounts for all of these gods. There is a verse and I'll explain. If you look into all of these other religions, you will notice that they're either henotheistic or polytheistic, because we're just dealing with polytheism right now.
The early Israelites.
So was the early Israelites were henotheists or monolatриsts?
Yahweh comes from a pantheon of gods.
That is an argument that's made by Old Testament scholars, but the arguments to suggest that is to say that Israel was identical in worship to other Canaanite sects, which I don't believe there is sufficient evidence for that.
I believe that there's sufficient evidence for.
But
I believe Yahweh was a Canaanite.
The problem is if you,
a Canaanite storm deity that came out of Canaanite mythology.
If you read the actual scholarship on that issue, all they've done is say, well, this is because Israelites were just another tribe amongst tribes. They didn't have a different belief system. They didn't have a different way of conceiving God, which denies an individual group of people being able to create their own history. Imagine if white people came and said, well, you know, the blacks they're just guys that like, you know, multiple gods, man. They don't believe in chi. They don't know how to really worship God. All they believe in is like some random ancestors. They eat humans and that. We're not able to define our own history? Of course not. Yeah. So, he said yes to that. No.
Every culture should be able to define its own history.
So why don't we do the same with the Israelites?
You can, but
So
why do they need to?
So if the Israelites, so now that we've settled that claim, so now that we've settled that claim about the storm deity stuff, we can move to this claim now. In polytheism, they argue that there could be a range of gods, but they don't tackle the metaphysical questions as to whether there is a universal cause for those things. In Christianity, uniquely as to other monotheistic religions, in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 6, it says this: there are many gods, as it were, and many lords. To us, there is one God, and to us, there is one Lord. What it means is that the existence of these other entities, they're not going to be gods in the highest sense, in the sense that we should pledge our fealty to them. They exist as lesser spiritual beings, as it were. We can call them demons, and demons is just a lesser spiritual being that went against God or forgot its purpose in God.
How does that prove that your God is superior to the other gods? If those other cultures did something more advanced than the God of the Bible?
What?
Your God is down to belief then.
No. Wait, no.
Give you a direct answer.
Hold on. No. Whoa. The reason I said what? The reason I said what?
The Egyptians built the pyramids. Ancient Hindus gonna.
So because I can build. Hold on. So
advanced cultures.
Can I finish?
The Jewish.
So because we can build
supreme mathematical.
Okay, so because you can build like massive ziggurats as well as pyramids, that makes them more advanced.
Yeah, because what has the God of the
This shows that these people believe in something else.
But you're not
critiquing. And your God supersedes.
But the problem again, God superseding another God is not the same as people superseding other people. None of what you said. But the problem. Okay, what did he talk about? I'm going to finish.
Why can't Judeo-Christian culture?
That's not God, that's culture. That's not a theology. I thought that we were doing straight theology, just talking about the God concept.
Yeah, but I'm trying to say to you, because he said that. He said something earlier about the God that he believes in is over the other gods. He said that, right?
Now, can I give my reasons for that?
And I'm saying
it's because of certain principles of metaphysics, meaning. Okay.
But that's what I'm saying. You might not be satisfied with his answer.
Yeah.
He can only give you what he believes.
But it's an answer. No.
Yeah.
Bear in mind.
He's going to tell you why that's true, but it's a belief.
Now again, bear in mind.
Other cultures you pray to other gods.
So if I just give you an example of the achievements of Christianity, for example, fine. The existence.
They don't have that knowledge.
Yeah, the existence of libraries, the existence of universities, the existence of irrigation system, the existence of for example, the sanitation movement, which no other culture had before the Israeli Judeo-Christian culture.
True, the Indus Valley civilizations.
The Indus Valley civilization was literally the birthplace of the Abrahamic tradition.
That's not true.
The Abraham cycle.
The Indus Valley is all the way over there in India, Pakistan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How is that where Jesus?
So
Judea,
Mesopotamia and the Indus River civilization actually have a lot of congruence.
Yeah, I know
the birth of the Abraham tradition was in Mesopotamia, for example. Yeah. But the Indus River Valley civilization does have roots back to the monotheistic concepts that came from Mesopotamia. Now, can I ask you? Okay, it's an easy thing. It's a causation thing.
I like that.
I'm gonna ask you a question. Okay.
No way you could.
Which civilization? I'm gonna ask you. Which civilization?
Say that it all started
Which?
India.
Can I ask you a question?
The Greeks had.
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. Which religion? Okay. Which civilization came first, Mesopotamia or the Indus River Valley civilization?
Ooh, they both kind of old.
No. They're both old. I know. I'm not old either. No, it is Mesopotamia.
Some people.
No one says. No. It's literally Mesopotamia, sir. The reason why it's Mesopotamia is because it was the very first time that we were able to build a society from a river valley. Okay. Now, Mesopotamia's first.
Still debatable.
Babylonian culture, Sumerian culture comes from this, but also the Abrahamic tradition comes from this as well. In fact, you see remnants of this within the Bible with the character of Abraham changing his name to Abraham. You have examples of this with the existence of the Enochic tradition of Enoch and so on. So we have early proto-Judean literature and culture such as the ziggurats. Ziggurats are mentioned in the Bible, for example. These things are commensurate with what comes to be known as the Christian religion. So your claim was, well, Christians have never done anything cool, and these other groups have done.
Cool. I'm saying that other cultures are cooler.
Okay, I've done cooler. How do you judge whether it's better or worse? I think being clean is better than building a big building.
It was clean. I said to you, in this valley.
No. They don't have a plumbing system is one thing. That's to keep the place clean, not to keep themselves clean. They didn't have a sanitary movement. They didn't. Christians uniquely had for example, the sanitary movement in America started in the 1700s. That's how late it was.
Native Americans
right?
clean.
Pardon?
Native Americans.
Not as